Lynn, do you mind saying something so I can test my speaker?
Sure, what can you do?
on air.
Cool, thank you. Okay, I'd like to call together this work session for January 18th, 2022. We'll start off with a winter events debrief and 2022 events preview by staff Dan Harris, our Events and Emergency Management Coordinator.
Thank you so much, Mayor Gamba. Mayor, Council, thank you for having me back here again. I am here, as you noted, to do a winter events debrief and then also an update on our 2022 events forecast. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen, and there's that. So we'll share it, and let's see, is it going to let me do my big screen slideshow? We're looking at the small one right now, right?
Looking at the one that shows your notes and next slide.
Well, I can't have you seeing my notes, so let me go ahead and swap right now. And that is, where are we hiding that feature? I'm so sorry. Let me see here now. Stop share, new share, big one. There we go. We've shifted? We've not shifted.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, winter events review and annual forecast. My name is Dan Harris. I'm the Events and Emergency Management Coordinator. I use he, they pronouns. I can be reached at harrisd@milwaukeeoregon.gov. So today we're going to talk about the Umbrella Parade and tree lighting because it was our only winter event this last year, following my conversation with this council in October of 2021. We're going to talk about the downtown decorating contest and how that went, or spoilers ahead, didn't went, and then also the 2022 events forecast. So the Umbrella Parade and tree lighting. Historically, we host the Umbrella Parade and tree lighting as one of our two winter events, the other being the winter solstice celebration in Milwaukie Bay Park. This past year, because of COVID concerns, primarily, we decided not to move forward with the winter solstice event and instead threw everything into the Umbrella Parade and tree lighting. There were some strengths for the event. It was reasonably well attended, especially coming out of that stage of the pandemic and having not had an event the previous year. We were able to host it in a COVID-conscious way, and although it's difficult to say with Omicron spreading as it is, there's no particular indication that there was a high transmission rate from that event. Outdoors, masking encouraged, etc. And then also it was a great opportunity for the community to come together and celebrate, which is really one of the key things that we look for in these events to begin with. There were some areas for improvement. There were some communication breakdowns, particularly between the city and our CERT volunteers. And on the next slide, I talk about some of our community partners and have an opportunity to thank them. But I do just right now want to go ahead and call out the excellent work done by our CERT team. They were instrumental in making the traffic management happen for this event, and we probably could do it without them, but I'm very, very glad that we didn't have to. So thanks to CERT on that. Additionally, there was a little bit of confusion about exactly when to start the parade, communicating with some residents, particularly in Axletree, about where there were going to be road closures and also parking, where would be appropriate parking. So I've got some notes on things that we can improve on that for future years. We did, of course, advertise the event several weeks in advance in the pilot and then also through the city social media and the city website, but not everybody's going to get all of those, and I think that there are opportunities to communicate more directly with the affected residents, so we're going to be looking for those in the future. Also entertainment, we did have I heard the phrase funeral march used, which is unfortunate. That's not really the air that we were looking to create for our holiday parade. I attribute that to we had the Milwaukie High School Band coming, and I think if you have a parade and you have a marching band, that's a heck of a lot better than a parade where the primary musical accompaniment is a group of carolers. Now, again, big thanks to the Dickens Carolers, and big thanks to the Milwaukie High School Marching Band for being willing to participate or being ready to participate. They had some of their key musicians drop out just prior to the event, and we weren't able to recruit a replacement band in time. So again, something that we're going to want to look at for next year. My understanding is that there were some COVID concerns there as well, and my sincere hope is that this time next year, when that high school population will have had access to vaccines for longer, and who knows what the COVID landscape will be next December. But I think we can get the marching band out next year. I think that's going to make a lot of a difference. And then also refreshments. Traditionally, we've handed out cookies and cocoa for this event, and it was an intentional decision not to do that this year to encourage people to keep their masks on. But some of the feedback that we received was that it sure was nice when there were cookies and cocoa. So we'll look at bringing that back for this coming year, COVID permitting. Like I said, I do want to say a big thank you to our community partners. Bob's Red Mill donated 1,500 cookie tokens so that although we were not handing out cookies at the event, people had an opportunity to go get a winter treat. Milwaukie CERT, as I said, traffic management and just general public safety, huge work that they did on that. The Milwaukie High School Band would have been even better if we'd been able to have them at the event, but they were responsive and ready to participate right up until they weren't able to. So thanks to them for that. The Milwaukie Arts Committee for the work that they did around the event, particularly around judging the umbrella contest. Twinkle Trees, who offered us a discount for some of their twinkle tree decorations, and also American Legion Post 180, who in addition to leading the parade with an honor guard, was able to host a toy drive earlier in the day so that we kept the spirit of giving alive with the event. Very appreciative to all of these folks for their support. Before I move on, do we want to say anything more about the umbrella parade and tree lighting, or should I continue on to talk about the decorating contest?
The tree lighting worked this year. That was novel.
That's a big plus. Thank you. Yeah, the tree did light. Say whatever else you will. That tree lit. So.
And I did appreciate that later on it was only half lit. That kind of rounded out the whole thing. Tradition was honored.
You know, I think one of the great things about the umbrella parade is that it is a Milwaukie tradition, and the tree lighting is part of that. A half lit tree later on, right on brand. So you know, we don't want to disappoint, and we really didn't in that department. How about that decorating contest? So in the past, Celebrate Milwaukie Inc. has sponsored this contest, and there's been a little bit of loose organization around it. And the idea is essentially that we would have these downtown businesses decorated to sort of light up the downtown area. It's intended to be beneficial for a variety of different reasons. Downtown gets decorated before the parade. Folks come down and see it. We were offering some free advertising to businesses who participated. I sent out mailers. I sent out a letter to 152 downtown businesses, and then also canvassed up and down Main Street with flyers to try to get folks to participate. We set a minimum threshold of 5 businesses participating to actually have the contest go through, and only 4 ended up turning in pictures of their storefront decorations. So I think for this, it's not necessarily so much a communication issue, because we did reach out, but I think that there are opportunities to build on some of the organization and some of the advertising for this that we did this year. It was a little bit of a different style than the contest has been in the past. So I'm optimistic that by continuing to communicate with businesses, and particularly potentially once the DMBA comes back into session, we might be able to get some more word out around this and get some more participation. So close on that threshold. I think we can really push it over in this coming year. There too, though, I do want to say thank you to Celebrate Milwaukie Inc., who, had the contest move forward, would have provided prizes. Councillor Beatty?
I actually started that contest when I was on the board of Celebrate Milwaukie Inc. and ran it for the 3 years that it ran. There was a 2-year gap when it didn't run, so that also, I think, contributed to there being difficult to get participation. But I appreciate that you did all that outreach downtown, door to door. It's a little disappointing that all of that didn't result in more decorating. when Celebrate Milwaukie Inc. did it, there was no entry. You just had everybody who was decorated as a certain date was judged. So there was like a drive around team of judges in a car driving around and just deciding based on who had decorated. But anyway, I do appreciate you giving it a try, and I like you said, I hope that there's a sort of a rejuvenated DMBA by this Christmas, and maybe that would help it be a little more lively. I did hear, just a little bit off topic, but I did hear somebody suggest in terms of our outreach for how to spend urban renewal dollars, that maybe some downtown decorating along Main Street was something the city could also do. So I throw that out there. But anyway, thank you for doing what you did.
Thank you very much for that insight. We moved away from just a drive around this year, and the reasoning for that is that we were hoping to get some more of this advertising online through Engage Milwaukie. And the idea being that we could have created an opportunity for folks both to register and engage with Engage Milwaukie, and then also to do just some free web-based advertising for some of these downtown businesses. Plus, it's a popular vote. Who doesn't like a popular vote? Something that people can participate in. We'll keep working on it. We'll keep refining this. There's a balance to be struck, and also as we have more of these urban renewal conversations, I'm hoping that there's more opportunity for maybe some more in-person or at least direct outreach. Council President Heisey.
I just want to say thanks to the 4 businesses that did step up and decorate, because they looked fantastic. I really enjoyed them, and I think a lot of people did. So the contest didn't happen, but we did have some participation, and it did make some very lively storefronts. So thanks to those folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, particularly here on this stretch of Main, and I don't want to leave anybody out, but this stretch of Main here between Monroe and Jackson, I mean, it looked really fantastic. Some of the window painting that was done, some of the decoration, people really took the like holiday, whatever that might be for you, and winter, whatever that might be for you theme, and ran with it. So there's a lot of creativity. I mean, there's a lot of vision, and I think it's just a question of kind of focusing it and getting it harnessed a little bit better. All right. So with that, events forecast. So there are this group of signature events that the city puts on every year, and those include the Volunteer of the Year Awards Dinner, Earth Day, Carefree Sunday, Arbor Day, the Umbrella Parade and tree lighting, and then also Winter Solstice. And some of these have been delayed in past years. So the Volunteer of the Year Awards Dinner, I think we're going into when eventually it is held, we'll be going into our 3rd year of not having had it, so we'll have quite a backlog. We'll get the Lash Brooks out there, hopefully, Hamid Shabata Bennett, and then whoever it is who ends up being the Volunteer of the Year this year. We're looking at pushing that back into the early summer, because this is ultimately, it really does seem like COVID is going to be with us for some time to come, and whether we're going to be able to do indoor events in the late winter, early spring, it's kind of an open question. It doesn't look great for that, for getting 100 people into a room for dinner. So that's not off the table this year. In fact, we still would very much like to make that happen. I think there's a good opportunity for that to happen. But if it does end up happening, it's going to be like in the April-May timeframe, or else maybe a little bit later in early summer. Earth Day ends up being primarily run through our Parks Board. So PARB is actually the entity that has ownership over that, and with that transferring to Public Works, I had a conversation with Natalie last week about what it is that her vision for it is, and I know that's still in development. But Earth Day, I think, is going to end up not necessarily moving entirely away from a digital footprint, but more incorporating an in-person aspect, so whether that ends up being some kind of habitat restoration or whatever else. But Earth Day, it very much looks like, is coming back this year. We intend to do it. All of this, I should say, is COVID permitting. I mean, it's entirely possible that we get some new surge that upends things. But looking out as best we can on a quarter by quarter basis, having that 3 to 4 month event horizon. That's not the right word, event horizon. That's astrophysics. But looking at these events that far out, I think is more of a realistic timeline. Whereas in the past, it was more possible to plan things out 6 months, 9 months in some cases in advance. We're having to play it a little bit closer. With that, Carefree Sunday. Carefree Sunday, we very much intend to bring back this year. I think that last year's effort to spread it out across every Sunday in August was a bit ambitious. And so what we're looking at is returning it to a single day event. I have some meetings set up later this week to do some early stage planning and then to get the RFP developed and pushed out. We've worked with contractors in the past to make that event happen. And I think that we will be doing that again this year, but it's just sort of a question of the scale of it. So we'll be looking more at going back to some kind of a neighborhood route, likely very similar to what we did in 2019. But the specific date, I'm working with Portland to coordinate to make sure that we're not conflicting with their Sunday Parkways events or any of the other great active transportation events that they have throughout the year. Again, it's just a question of scale and what's going to be really possible and what we can actually execute on, given COVID concerns at the time. Arbor Day this last year was fantastic. We had that great partnership with Friends of Trees, again primarily headed up by Public Works and Natalie's team. I say primarily. I don't want to take any of the credit for that. They did such an excellent job, and we really provided logistical support here on the events planning side. So hats off to Public Works for that. And having talked with Natalie, my understanding is that she's going to take and continue to build on that success. And I look forward to partnering with her and continuing to support her in those efforts. The Umbrella Parade and tree lighting and winter solstice. So this one I want to see a little bit different going into 2022, and I'd be interested to. I'm here to solicit council's feedback on it. So the Umbrella Parade is a Milwaukie institution. As far as I know, that's the Umbrella Parade. I think we're the ones who do that. I think we should be very careful to keep the Umbrella Parade and to keep it alive and active. I also know that in the past we've run into this problem where we have these two winter events that are 2 weeks apart, and that we end up with. It's pretty taxing on the staff resources that we have, on some of our community volunteer resources. There are some opportunities for cost savings, and so what I'm really looking at is trying to combine these into some kind of a Milwaukie winter festival. I think that if we, rather than doing the Umbrella Parade on the first weekend in December and the solstice event on the third weekend in December, we have an opportunity here, maybe that second weekend in December, to run together the Umbrella Parade and the no longer solstice, but waterfront celebration, or again, Milwaukie Winter Festival, into one thing. The first when I started talking about this here around City Hall, the first bit of pushback that we got, or the first concern was, well, what about the Christmas ships? When I spoke with the folks who run Christmas ships, there's actually some enthusiasm for pushing that big Milwaukee Bay viewing up a week. I guess that there's a pretty significant difference in river conditions from that second week of December to that third week. And they were saying that if they can get it pushed back to that second week, there's some interest in that. And so I would want to speak with them and confirm that is something that the combined fleet is willing to do. But from my initial conversations, it very much seems like that's a realistic possibility. And I think that by combining these into a single event, we're going to have an opportunity to have maybe more of not that we can't have families out at solstice, lots of families come out to solstice. But historically, the afternoon, the Umbrella Parade, the tree lighting, that's been kind of a family event. And then solstice tends to draw a little bit of an older crowd, a little bit more of an adult crowd. And I think that by combining them, we have some opportunities to just sort of build success on success. We've already got folks down there. Thank you so much for coming out. Now, join us in celebrating the season right across the river here. Plus, it moves us away from that awkward thing where this is our solstice event. No, it's not on the solstice. I know it's not on the solstice. It's our winter festival. It can be any old time at all, and we can still come down and see the Christmas ships. I think we keep a lot of the spirit of those same two events without necessarily. There's an opportunity here So that's the direction I would like to see it go. And very quickly before I stop talking, I'll say that there are also dozens of smaller events that occur throughout the year. And that can be everything from a neighborhood block party to the Milwaukie Farmers Market, which counts as an event, to First Fridays when those were in session. To just a restaurant closing down a couple of parking stalls in front to have a band play. So these can require different levels of support, and I know that we have a very active community and a very interested community, lots of folks who want to see big things happen in the city. I also want to see big things happen in the city. Given that we have a finite amount of resources, a finite amount of staff time, I think it's important to consider how some of these events can get they can get bigger than it might seem like they would. So it's very easy for an event to go from, oh, well, we're just going to have a couple of dozen people here in this park, to, okay, well, now it's actually so big that we need porta potties, that we need traffic management, that we're going to bring out food vendors, and that brings on some additional licensing and public health concerns. So where we are able to partner with community groups, so Celebrate Milwaukie Inc. and the Farmers Market is a great example of that. That's a huge lift. And the majority of that is borne by the community. We're very excited for those opportunities, and I am here to work with community groups and to find ways to make that stuff happen and to do some of these things that really celebrate our community. Where there's not as much support available, and where we have concerns about how feasible some of these proposals are, then I'm going to look for an opportunity to work with our community groups and our community partners to scale things back to a manageable and to a realistic level. We can plan all the events we want, and if we're not able to actually execute them and put them on effectively, then that's worse in a lot of ways than not having them at all. A half-done event that doesn't quite come together, we can do better than that. And so that's what I'd like to work towards. So with that, questions or comments, but before we get to that, I'm going to just go ahead and throw my contact information back up once more. If folks do have questions, if people who are watching this, who are participating in the meeting, or who see it later would like to reach out to me to talk about this, please do. harrisd@milwaukieoregon.gov. Councillor Beatty?
So I would, I'm intrigued by your idea of consolidating into one event. I think there is an opportunity there if it can be coordinated with the Christmas ships. I will say the solstice is a longer standing event than the umbrella parade by far. I guess there had been an umbrella parade at some point in the farther past that was brought back about 10 years ago, but the solstice has been going on for at least the 20 years that I've lived here. The solstice was a much more it was a much smaller event and more family scaled until we added the beer store. And that changed the dynamic. And so, that's a conversation to have. That made it much more popular with the adults, as you point out. Maybe there's a version, that doesn't include alcohol. Maybe that's not a bad idea. Anyway, I just, the solstice is to me as beloved as the umbrella parade, if not more so. So I don't want to see it go by the wayside. I will say that. And I remember it when it was, an old ring of a fire ring on a gravel parking lot, and there were, a couple hundred people maybe, and less on a nasty night. So, it's been a victim of, its own success, I guess. And like I said, I think the inclusion of the beer store made it considerably more popular, but also made it more of a more management concerns like you're raising. So.
I hear you loud and clear, and that's and I want to be clear. I'm not, when I say let's move it up a week, I don't in any way mean, okay, well, last year we didn't do it, so let's not ever do it again, or let's not do it anymore. Like I completely hear you, and I agree with you. Solstice. How wonderful that as a community we're able to go down by a fire by the river and celebrate the season. There's something, I feel like that's something that humans have been doing for thousands and thousands of years. I'm totally on board with it, And if there's a way to consolidate these two things and maybe work on some of these logistical issues and see if we can't get them a little bit more finely tuned. I think that's something that's worth looking at, because at this point we do have, and I don't need to tell you, but for the audience, we have thousands of people who come out to this event, and it's getting a little unwieldy. Which does not mean that we shouldn't do it or that we shouldn't encourage it to continue to be what it was pre-pandemic. I mostly just mean let's make sure that we're doing it in a way that's safe and conscientious and that's sustainable. And I think there's a way to do that.
Well, so I would throw two other things out there into the mix. One is that, whether we do it this year or we wait until after Milwaukie Bay Park is whatever we do, we're going to have an interruption in a solstice in a riverfront event when Milwaukie Bay Park is under construction. We're going to have at least a one winter interruption, I think. So do we do it this year or do we wait until that's done is one question. And then the other is, if we are going to, and this is a beloved pet project of mine, I will admit up front, but if we're going to sort of merge the two, is the tree lighting the big tree in the park and not this tree in front of City Hall. But that's a very costly endeavor, which Peter Passarelli can tell you because he's done the research on what it would take to do that.
It is. And so the figure that I've heard on that, and somebody else can pull this down, but the figure that I heard was $35,000. And so the combined, there it is. So the combined budget for these events is about $11,000. So I think that's going to be sort of an open question, because when we do move to the new City Hall, and when eventually the city is not in control of this property where I'm sitting right now, we're not going to have the tree that we have now anyway. So then what does that look like? And I don't know that answer. If there is a way to light that, if that's something that that we can get figured out, fantastic. But as it stands right now, one way or another, we're losing the pickle. We're losing the big tree that we have right now, and that's and we will figure out what comes after it.
Kathy, go ahead.
I think we actually are going to, in all likelihood, still be able to use the tree, the pickle. See, this is why we should call it the pickle. Just given what I expect to see in the RFQ anyway. So we may not need to have that conversation anytime soon. And but what I really wanted to say is thank you for trying to think through this. I think this is really challenging, and I have two things. One, I'm curious to hear kind of where you see improvements in efficiencies around combining those two. And I'm just thinking about people with kids who are going from tree lighting that starts at 3. Oftentimes the ships don't come to the bay until around 7. So are we really going to be able to keep people entertained in downtown for 4 hours? Is there the possibility of getting the ships to the bay earlier, like 5:30 or 6? It gets dark, but they do travel a long ways. So I know that we're not the only stop on their route, and they want it to be dark the whole way that they're traveling. So anyway, I can think of efficiencies, but I'm curious to see what you think the advantages are.
Yeah, so I think at this point, part of what we're running into is that we're pulling out teams of volunteers 2 different weekends right before Christmas. And I know that people have been willing historically to do that. And I know that we've made it happen. And I also know that it's been a reach. If there is a way to say, please come out, donate this largish chunk of a Saturday to this event. But that's the Saturday we're asking you for. But that's the day we're asking you for. I think that we have that opportunity for a little bit better volunteer recruitment. Some of what I have heard us running into, ships do come earlier in the night, is some trouble with that issue. I know too that we run into the same thing with staff in terms of planning around that. It's primarily personnel that I'm looking at, but also as I look at this event's budget. I think that there are places where, I mean, even if we're just getting down to issues as simple as porta potties and traffic control, I think that that's where I'm seeing some of these efficiencies. I will say thank you for the note on the ships, because I hadn't thought that all the way through. One of the great things about talking about this in January is that there's opportunity for these conversations. I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to read Councillor Beatty's comment in the chat there, but 5:30ish, then on their way back. Yeah, I don't want to speak for the Christmas ships fleet, but I think it's worth looking into, and it's something that I will look into before we make any decisions on this.
And I just want to add real quick, and I don't remember, but I think we haven't had much support for doing safe crossings of 99 in the past for the solstice event. So if this meant that we could get some CERT volunteers to really help with that, I think that would be a huge benefit.
Whether that ends up being CERT or another organization, CERT would be the natural fit, but however that ends up looking, if we can have enough people who are volunteering and enough people out there to help keep folks safe as they're crossing that major highway, I got to view that as a net positive. And Mayor Gamba, I see your hands up. Kelly, I see your hands up. I'm going to be quiet.
Go to Kelly first. She was up first.
I defer to the mayor. You go first, and then I'll go after.
Well, I appreciate staff thinking about efficiencies. I would want to see numbers, like actual, what are we gaining for what we're losing? Mm-hmm. What we're losing is it will not be a solstice event anymore. And that is, as you point out, that's centuries old event. Not obviously in Milwaukie, but as a species, it's probably one of the few holidays. It's probably one of the oldest holidays as a species, and I kind of hate. That's one of the things I loved about Milwaukie, is that we actually celebrated that, whereas not a lot of cities do. I also have the same concern that Kathy has of that's a long day. It's a long day for the staff that are manning it in the cold. It's a long day to ask families to be out. I would hate to dilute the success we've had. I would not call us a victim of anything. I think the solstice, having grown to the level it has, is all good. It's a wonderful thing that we have an event here in Milwaukie that draws that kind of crowd. I think there's a lot of longtime people in Milwaukie who just continue to see the city drop event after event after event. When I first got here, we did a 4th of July parade. We did Milwaukie Days, DAZE. We did a lot of things. And as the city's gotten more populous and younger, you would expect the opposite to be true, right? You would expect there to be more things, more events. I am fully aware of the fact that city budgets, and when I say that, I mean all the cities in the state budgets are shrinking relative to the cost of doing business. So we will constantly be looking for ways to solve for that until we fix the property tax issue. But man, I hate to see the best event that we do, the most popular event we do, get watered down in any way. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Kelly.
So I would just say it's all really helpful, and I just want to back Dan. I think the first reaction when I heard it was, oh, what? And then the more I thought it through, I don't know that it's that much of it is a longer day for staff in terms of kind of young people with kids. I have the same problem with the tree as I do with the boats. It has to be dark. So I'm kind of I know that that's a thing that we need to make sure that we kind of do man the logistics around that, so that people have something compelling to see. And I don't think we're viewing it as like, oh, wow, I can save money. I don't plan to save money by consolidating them. I think what we can do is just create a comprehensive kind of fun experience. And then we don't lose what we've heard from the downtown community is what they like about Umbrella is people are downtown. So we want to make sure that we still have people downtown that time of year because we've heard that that's really important and that and the Umbrella Parade does that in a really cool way. We also have a plaza we haven't really gotten to use, which is right at a really safe crossing at 99, that we can make safe. So I think there's just kind of a neat opportunity to do. And I really appreciate Dan bringing this to you all and to me and Ann and others to kind of think through. Because I think, Mayor, I think there's a way to not water it down. I think there's a way to combine the best of both. We do spend a lot of time every year explaining why it's not on solstice. So I'm not quite living up to the pagan vibes all the time anyway in its current iteration. I mean, I think we want to go there, but it's not, we're usually not on the date. So we're trying to get in this nice sweet spot where we have a lot of really cool lights to look at. We have all ages of people. We want to keep our downtown engaged, but we also want to hold true to this long-standing Milwaukie institution of going down to the river and looking at the ships with fire. And I think if you guys are okay with it, we'd really like to just see if we can put them together in a way that doesn't feel watered down. And I hear you, Councilor Beatty, in terms of we're going to have to take a pause on the park at some point. But I also feel like we may not have to your point, Mayor, I feel like people are they missed solstice last year. So I think we're feeling as a team that this is a place that people expect us to be. And what's the smartest, best, coolest way to put them together? And if y'all are saying, yeah, maybe you could put them together, just make sure it's still good and don't water it down. We can take that feedback. And also try to make sure that we have, think about the little kids. I mean, I think that I have little kids. I mean, they're getting older now, but I'm definitely thinking about that attendee as well, which is, okay, if I roll up at 3, I want to do the umbrella braid and I want to catch a ship. Is that going to work for someone? And I actually think we can make that work.
So obviously we could start the umbrella parade later.
Yeah.
To shorten the day. I love Lisa's. I mean, in the perfect world, Lisa's right. We would light the big tree in the park, and that would make the natural progression, right? And in the even more perfect world, Kellogg Dam would be gone. There would be an undercrossing of 99E. The parade would cross under the 99E and go to the big tree, and we'd light the big tree, and then we'd have the solstice ship viewing, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of perfection left to achieve to get to that.
Don't discount the beauty of closing down 99E for a bunch of umbrellas. To me, I love that. Shut the highway down to watch a bunch of kiddos in their umbrellas decorated.
Yeah, that could happen too. Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to add that to be clear, when I was asking questions, I'm all for trying this. I think we should try doing it and see what happens. I feel like you've gotten good information on what we're concerned about, and I think you can run with it. And I know that having 4,000 people attend the solstice event actually has been burdensome. It has been a safety issue, and it's been a real challenge from kind of the events coordination and management perspective. So as much as I love that it's big, I also acknowledge that for staff, and for liability and for a whole host of unfun, pragmatic reasons, it has been something that we maybe want to look at and try and do better. So I think let's just try it.
Well, thank you very much for that perspective, Council President Heisey. I do hear Council's concerns, and I don't want to create a situation where we're throwing away a Milwaukie tradition and this Milwaukie institution. To Kelly's point, I do think there's a way to to combine them in a way that preserves the best of both of these without compromising on safety, without compromising on logistics. So that's the direction that I would like to go with it. But the other thing is, ultimately, if council is strongly opposed to trying this, we're still a year out, and it's not like anything is set in stone or even has gone beyond conversations at this point. So if the guidance is hey, you stop this, fair enough. But if it's let's try it, let's see if we can make it work. I'd like to run with it. I'd like to see if we can make this into something. I think there's a good opportunity.
Generally, are people okay with him doing that? Okay. Then we will look more into it. We'll figure out how we keep the best parts of these two events into something that's a little bit more manageable while still being really fun. I have talked actually for years. Here's my, Councillor Beatty, here's my throwing something into the mix. I've always wanted to have a market, like an outdoor market during this event. I've always thought it'd be really cool. I'm not saying we can do it. And some things are going to fly with us and some things won't. But I think that helping our businesses also sell some product during the holidays, if people are going to be buying, getting them to buy local would be really pretty cool. So I really appreciate you all giving Dan some space to try and to figure this out. I also really appreciate Dan coming back from paternity leave and jumping right into this discussion. And he did, and he's been leading a really great dialogue with all of us, including our equity team. So there is a separate equity discussion that we're having right now about how we make sure that we're providing support to those events as well. And he's been leading those conversations in a really wonderful way. Go, Councillor Faulkner.
I've got just a question. When do you, I'm hearing keeping the best parts, and it's occurring to me that, we might not have consensus on what that means. And it might be good to have a conversation, a check-in about what's getting cut and what sticks around and, what makes the cut. So when do we think we might have an opportunity? I would hate to see it go too far and then someone catches wind that their ideas are getting nixed. And
within 2 to 3 months, I think we'll be back here. I think that there's some pretty easy pieces. The ships are going to be a part of it. The umbrellas are going to be a part of it. Probably some sort of parade on a road is going to be a part of it. Which road, I think, got opened up tonight, but something on a road is going to be a part of it. But, do we have more lights all the way down the road? Do we have more lights over in the park, even if we can't do the big tree? I think there's a bunch of things we're just trying to figure out how we make this an experience. And that's part of what Dan's going to have to price out and figure out what realistically makes sense for management on that day. But I think the easy commitment are the two big pieces of those two events happen, which is an umbrella parade happens. We all gather in a park to see ships. So the question is the pieces that surround those things. I would love to say there's no fire, but I will lose that. So I can probably guarantee there's also going to be fire. So with those things, I think most people are going to be pretty happy. And your liability.
There's already some disagreement. Some people might consider that one of the best parts.
They do. Everyone but your liability manager considers that your best part. I understand I'm going to lose. There will be fire, there will be ships, and there will be umbrellas. So everything else that I've heard, people kind of open to some other tweaks and changes. I'm not hearing anybody really committed to it has to be this one thing. If we can commit to those three things, do we generally have support to go look at the little bits that surround those tweaks?
Yeah, and I guess I think I think that we will probably want to have a conversation about what some of those other things are too.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I think part of what I'm asking Dan, if I'm really transparent, is this needs to be equitable. And we need to be looking at how we engage all parts of our community in this work. And that just takes real conversations with people. So that's going to take us some time before we're going to be done with those. We are talking to the equity committee, I believe in March. So maybe we can plan on being back here in April or May. Perfect. Okay. really, really wonderful job, Dan. I
Thank
should
you.
say that too.
And thank you all very much. It's good to be back. Mayor, I think you're muted.
I'm having two screens. So our next item is the Design and Landmark Committee annual report with Brett Kelver and potentially people from the Design and Landmarks Committee. Anybody, Brett?
No, not tonight. We're doing a little different this year. So yeah, Brett Kelver, senior planner with the city. Good evening, Mayor Gamba, councilors. I'm continuing to serve as the staff liaison for the city's Design and Landmarks Committee. And we check in with you at the beginning of every year to kind of give you an update on the group's work and where they're headed in the coming year. And as we noted in the staff report, both because I think probably more because of other staff workload issues and just the things that have been on our to-do list, probably more than the continued COVID pandemic. We have just not convened the DLC as much in the past year. They did have some important gatherings to review the design features of a couple of projects, Henley Place and the Coho Point. They're meeting later this week to look at the Dogwood Station project on Washington Street. But we had to set aside for a little while the group's main focus of the past couple of years, which had been working to outline some needed updates to the downtown design review process. And looking into the coming year with all the things that continue to be on the to-do list for the planning department, we're looking to probably continue that pattern. I think we're planning to reconvene the group, I think probably in April or May, for a very focused kind of final pull together of the draft of the proposed amendments for downtown design review process. And then we expect to kind of push forward with a quick review with the Planning Commission sometime during the summer, and then in the fall, October, November, coming to you, the council, to try to move forward and finalize the amendments to the downtown design process. So I know we were budgeted for about a half-hour discussion. I don't think we need that unless you have a lot of questions about it, but I guess I'll leave it there for now and see if you have some questions or thoughts.
Well, I was just happy to see a proposed endpoint, because it does seem like it's been several years in the making, and it has been kind of dormant. So I'm glad to see that it's moving again and you have an endpoint in sight.
Yeah, we're happy to be focused on that as well.
Any other questions, anybody? Brett, I just want to pass along grumblings I've heard from developers and others about sort of the two-part process, which feels needless to them. It feels, that the DLC is advising the Planning Commission where they're going to have to go in any case, and they just feel like they're giving the same presentation twice, I guess. So for whatever that's worth, if there's a way to combine it more as they're thinking about what the new process looks like, or something to that effect, just throwing it out, giving you the feedback I get.
Yeah, that's helpful, and that's something that's I guess been a part of the overarching conversation, and that reflects a little bit of, I guess there's some history of the group itself. I mean, the Design Landmarks Committee at one point in the past was a commission with decision-making power, and it was the place that you went for a final decision, aside from an appeal to council, for certain things regarding historic preservation or downtown design. And, at some point it became a committee that was serving in this advisory role, and that by its nature, I guess, has added that element of some sense perhaps of redundancy or repetition. And I think the effort to try to clarify the downtown design standards and to present, kind of two very clear tracks that give developers an opportunity to just, if you can meet the standards, and if the standards seem to make sense and produce the kinds of buildings that we'd like to see in Milwaukie in general, then there may not even be a need for a planning commission hearing. At this point, I'm not sure that we'll get quite to writing out the DLC of the entire process for design review, but point taken about looking at that process overall and the role that the DLC plays in it. What we have tried to do with this process is we do, even if it is repetitive for the applicant, we do always try to fit the reviews in with the overall land use timeline, so that we're not dragging the process out because we have to schedule a much longer timeline for the DLC. And that's one thing that I think, in fact, some of the virtual meetings that we've been able to do have given the group even greater flexibility to shift things around to meet those timelines. So all that to say, point taken, understood. Any other questions?
No? All right. Well, thanks, Brett.
Happy to keep it short and sweet.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing the package, as Lisa said.
We'll see you in the fall with that. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your time. Good night.
Good night. All right. And the last item on the work session tonight is a North Clackamas.
Kind of quick overview of the different aspects of the partnership between the North Clackamas Watersheds Council and the city, and kind of where they're each at right now. And I will make sure to leave time for questions, because I'm sure there will be some. So if that sounds good, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And hopefully you can all see a slide deck. Does that sound? Can you folks see slide deck?
We can, but yeah, we also see the preview on the side on the left.
Great, thank you. Did that change that problem? Nope. Okay.
No, we're still seeing the preview.
One other way. Okay, it should be good there. So yeah, this is just a quick update. There's kind of well, it looks like it's not advancing, so I'm going to go back to the low-tech version of this. Sorry about that. Okay, so there's pardon the sidebar there, but there's 5 real quick things I want to hit on. Obviously, the big one that we've been working on a lot is Kellogg Dam removal and lake restoration. But we're also in kind of the final phases of our watershed action plan. We have a partnership with the city around establishing riparian vegetation and shade for streams. And obviously, we've been working with the city on the comp plan implementation of tree code. And then there's been a couple of other aspects of trying to facilitate as much interjurisdictional coordination as we can. And I'm just going to kind of get right into it. A little bit of a background. This is the kind of territory that our council covers. So we cover the Kellogg, within the city of Milwaukie, we cover the Kellogg Mount Scott watersheds. as well as areas to the south that are outside of the city in the Boardman and River Forest and Rynearson Creek watershed. We also cover the Willamette from Eldon Bar to Milwaukie Bay. The other portion of the northern portion of Milwaukie falls within the territory of the Johnson Creek Watershed Council, and we work with them collaboratively all the time. And but obviously, the way watershed councils were created, they all follow watershed boundaries. That's what the city of Milwaukie. So I'll get into the big one first, which is Kellogg dam removal and lake restoration. And we obviously are trying to navigate a big window of opportunity with infrastructure and congressionally directed spending. And there's really two big elements of this that I think you're all eminently familiar with. One of them is securing funding for removing the dam, which means replacing the Highway 99 bridge, which has a price tag of about $22 million on it, almost all of which goes to replacing the bridge. And then the second thing is what happens to the lake bed when the dam is gone and that warm water impoundment gets restored. And how do we approach that? Dam removal and bridge funding, which is obviously the bigger ticket item, I'll take first. That is the bridge is owned by ODOT. It is the number one ODOT-owned fish passage barrier in the state. Obviously, in 1932, the highway was built resting on it, which we all regret. The bridge is earthquake vulnerable, but not high on ODOT transportation priorities. And again, it's got that price tag under it. And obviously, the city and the council both want the trail under crossing from Milwaukie Bay to downtown Milwaukie as part of that design. And that is, the reasons for that are obvious. The Infrastructure Act presents us with a bunch of pots of money that we are obviously actively pursuing and working with Kelly on, as well as other partners. ODOT has $1.2 billion in federal transportation formula funding coming through infrastructure. Both the council and the city, the Watershed Council and the city have both obviously been working on ODOT. So has the Native Fish Society, and so have some other folks as well. There's also $800 million in National Culvert Removal, Replacement, and Restoration grants, and $400 million in the NOAA Fisheries Community-Based Restoration Program that we are trying to position this with. ODFW just submitted their list of projects to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on Friday. This project is on that list. There are other pots of money that we are still also investigating with FEMA and our Natural Resources Conservation Service and others that may end up being applicable, but those are a little further down the list. In a lot of these, there's not a lot of federal guidance. NOAA Fisheries, which has been the biggest supporter among the federal agencies of this project so thus far, is still waiting for guidance. They're expecting in February. So the rules of how their money is going to be distributed, we don't know yet, and neither do they. But we are trying to position all of our ducks as close to in a row as we can get for this. And this really means probably 5 different things. One of them is the support of the city council is huge. To be able to say, hey, we own, we, the city of Milwaukie, which owns the vast majority of Kellogg Lake, really want to see this happen, has been huge so far and will continue to be huge. And we are also obviously trying to be ready to move as quickly as possible when there is federal guidance. And we do know how to apply to NOAA Fisheries and what needs to be in the application. There's a lot of things we obviously can expect, and those are obviously making the case for the project on a scientific basis from a salmon restoration standpoint. That's pretty easy. But really and obviously we've all been communicating with ODOT and the Oregon Transportation Committee about ODOT prioritization, and we'll continue to do that. A couple of the things that we've been in conversation with Kelly about, one of them is just when there is an application to NOAA Fisheries or some other federal grant program, who's the actual applicant? Is it the city of Milwaukie? Is it ODOT? It's really emerged that it's probably going to need to be either the city of Milwaukie and or American Rivers, which is a national conservation group that has managed a similar dam removal type project with the city of Bellingham through the same grant program, and is also interested in this project. And there will obviously be need to be a cooperative agreement between whoever the applicant is and the multiple owners of the infrastructure involved, which would be the city. And again, kind of we're using a model of we've kind of been discussing as a model, the middle fork of the Nooksack Dam removal up in Washington, the city of Bellingham. And part of that as well. The second part of the Kellogg Dam piece is the lake bed channel. And this is really saying, okay, what happens when the dam is gone? And that has always been a needed issue with talking to DEQ, DSL, ODF&W, and NOAA Fisheries on the regulatory side to say, how's this going to work? Are fish going to be able to get up there? At what times of the year? What are the flows going to be like? The big question, obviously, is how does the channel need to be aligned so that the sediment that is in the lake stays where it is rather than moving downstream. And there's obviously ways of doing that, and this process is designed to get to all of that, as well as to show that this part of the project is moving toward being more quote unquote shovel ready, and that we have a task list and a calendar of implementation. Another part of this process is coordinating with mitigation banks. And this is obviously a huge opportunity that I know you're all familiar with, where private investment in this lake bed restoration comes into play. It pencils out well as a mitigation bank. And that comes with the mitigation bank having a 10-year commitment to monitoring and maintenance. The example of this that's worked out really well is the Rynearson project down in Gladstone. And there's multiple credit markets that come into play in Kellogg Lake. Rynearson was done as a Superfund mitigation site, but this project also taps into more into things like Section 404 river credits and wetland mitigation credits, which are a bigger deal now as the Portland Harbor Fund may become. The status of the channel design is we are forming the technical advisory committee that's largely been agreed on. We are getting revised proposals on Friday from OTAC, Interfood, and geoengineers. The idea is to get this done by October, November. The city of Milwaukie is obviously funding part of it. About a quarter of this is being funded by the city of Milwaukie. The rest is coming from the Resources Legacy Fund, the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, and the PGE Salmon Habitat Support Fund. And the other part of this that, again, you're probably eminently familiar with is Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden have been a big supporter of this project. Senator Merkley put a congressionally directed spending request into the federal budget. This is separate from infrastructure. It's in the NOAA Fisheries regular appropriations bill for $585,000 for this channel design to move this process. If that comes through, it will move this process a lot further, a lot faster, and take the lake design to a permit level. Right now, that appropriations request was passed Senate appropriations, but then now we have a continuing resolution on the Hill until the 18th of February. So that's the point. As we get closer to that date, that's where it may move. Next it would go to the floor of the Senate and the House. And we may have another continuing resolution. We may start to work on a budget. There's obviously a lot of things that happen in DC. The city and its role in the lake bed restoration, obviously the city owns most of it. So while the Watershed Council and our consultant, Cascade Environmental Group, is going to be managing the bidding process and kind of facilitating the meetings and scheduling the meetings, obviously we can't do it without the city because the city has multiple departments that are in, have key interest in what happens in the lake, because obviously it is mostly yours. And that includes aspects of engineering. Coho Point is obviously involved, parks. So there's going to be meetings, and Kelly and Peter and myself have been talking about who should be the points on this. If the CDS request comes through for that 585, part of that is intended for the city to have funds to manage that, the staff involved. It's meant to cover that. The other part of it is mitigation bank information sharing and RFP. Obviously, at some point, the city will probably want to issue an RFP for a mitigation bank to develop the project further. Say, okay, yeah, we're going to enter into an agreement, just like the city did at one point with Wildlands back in the day before my time at the council. And again, this can be a process that really benefits the city. In the case of the Ryan project, the city of Gladstone got a large chunk of the money from the sale of credits that Columbia Restoration Group sold to the ERP in the borough park. So that's just a part of how the city can work with these mitigation banks. And that's something that Kelly and myself and John have had lots of conversations about. There's obviously a lot of allies in this. The ones that most of you are familiar with, the ones that I really want to highlight that have been part of this whole process has been the city council itself has been a huge ally, and where the city council has led, it's really helped get everybody else on board. And the other one is the last one on this list, which is the public. I have never heard anyone in my time at the council say that they want the dam to stay there, that they like the lake. I think everybody sees what's going on with warmer summers and climate change and river forest lake and algae blooms down the road. And we all, I think, want to see a free flowing stream and a restored, enhanced natural area for the people of Milwaukie. And I think the people of Milwaukie want to see the same thing. So that's great and relatively rare in dam removal projects. So that's Kellogg Dam. I'm going to keep going just to get to questions because I'm sure you have them, because these will go by, the other ones will go by relatively quickly. We are developing a watershed action plan. It should be done by July. City staff have been major stakeholders in this whole process, mostly Peter, Natalie, Jerry, and Kelly as well, and some folks on the planning side. I think Vera's been part of it. Basically, this is a 10-year restoration strategy for our watershed and for our council, but also as we develop the lead strategies for saying, how do we restore fish and wildlife habitat, climate resilience, water quality, water quantity, improve stormwater, improve environmental equity. There's going to be a set of overarching strategies that's going to come out in a couple of months, probably. And we're going to be pulling together a leadership session for all of our stakeholders to say, here's what all the data on our watersheds and all the stakeholder input says, this is what we should be focused on. And some of that will obviously have pieces of it that live within each jurisdiction. As we've talked about before, City of Milwaukie is kind of at the downstream end of the Kellogg Mount Scott watershed. So it hurts whatever happens upstream, good or bad. And there are things that, will come out of this plan that will hopefully help that situation. And we'll be taking those to Clackamas County and Happy Valley and West as well, but we're also going to be bringing strategies to all of our leadership in all of our jurisdictions and basically saying, do these sound right? What are we missing? We also obviously work with the city on streamside revegetation. It is part of our of a 3-agency program between the city of Milwaukie that we operate both in the city of Milwaukie in West Territory and in Milwaukie Water Services Territory to restore streamside vegetation, to lower stream temperature, reduce erosion, improve habitat, and slow and hopefully someday stop, or at least put the brakes on the spread of invasive species. A lot of it happens on private land just because that's who owns most streamside property in our watersheds. We do have some public sites as well, and some that are kind of quasi-public, like the one behind our office in the Milwaukie Presbyterian Church that's privately owned, but the public goes there all the time and it's open to the public. We have 160 sites. We started the Milwaukie branch of this program only a couple of years ago, so we have 12 sites now, but we've been able to leverage the money that we've gotten from the city more than one-to-one by bringing in money from OWET. So we're out there. We're obviously in the midst of planting season right now. And that program is chugging away and expanding slowly in Milwaukie. Comprehensive plan implementation, we've obviously been part of tracking the process of the tree parking and middle housing code. And obviously we're glad that Milwaukie is doing it. I think setting a pace for the rest of the county, and we'll obviously be participating in the hearing later this evening, so I don't need to belabor that. We have kind of also been bringing in the Clackamas County chapter of Unite Oregon, along with Urban Green Space Institute in Portland, Ottawa, to be kind of part of this group of folks who's working on this. And again, we think the city's done a great job in creating a path that we think with a couple of tweaks will be something that the rest of Clackamas County will hopefully someday imitate, or at least the rest of our watershed. So thank you. The last one is really just the interjurisdictional coordination. Obviously, watershed boundaries and city boundaries are never the same. So that's part of what our watershed action planning process is designed to address. But also, we've been working with Wes on their stormwater standards. That started way before COVID and it's taken a pause, but Jerry has been part of that along with Natalie, and really just saying, how does what their standards are for stormwater is obviously going to come downstream. The Johnson Creek Watershed Council has gotten a grant to look at reinstalling some of the large wood at the mouth of Johnson Creek. We also had a little bit of money inherited from another project to do some restoration in Milwaukie Bay after the parks stuff is done. So there's going to be a conversation going on in the next little bit about what could that look like. The other thing we've been working with the city on is, obviously you see the picture from the Kellogg Lake oil spill back in the fall. If there is a fine levied at any point, and that's an if, unfortunately, there is a program through DEQ where 80% of that fine, instead of going to the bank account at DEQ, can get spent on a local project. And we obviously have plenty of local projects where that money can kind of stay in Milwaukie and stay in the watershed that was impacted rather than just going into the coffers. So, and there may be other areas where we can help facilitate interjurisdictional coordination down the road, whether it's at Elk Rock Island or whatever else needs to happen. Because we work with different agencies, we're sometimes well positioned to do that. So I know that there is not a lot of time, so I apologize if I was kind of speaking at the speed of an auctioneer, but I wanted to make sure we had time for questions.
Lisa, I saw your hand up earlier.
Yeah. Well, my hand was up earlier when you were giving the list of the money pots of money, and you had the 800,000 and 800 million and the 400 million. No, one was no fisheries and one was culverts, if I'm remembering. Are those national pots or state of Oregon pots?
National.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, that took a bit of a haircut on the Hill from when it was initially conceived.
Right. I remember the culvert one in particular. Yeah, had a bigger. That's the one the Idaho guy was behind, right? The other question, sorry, you had something on your last slide about, now I've totally lost it.
Supplemental environmental project.
Yeah. Can you put your last slide back up? Sorry.
Sure, no problem.
Oh, the spill. Yeah, no, it was about the spill. So I have been making life miserable for people at DEQ over this spill. My sense is that there's not going to be a fine. Also, the sense we got from the fire district was a little, that there's not going to be a fine, unfortunately. I do think I think the whole thing showed that some things are broken. But one of the things that's broken is how they're allowed to store gas in these plastic totes. And it really alarms me because we've got lots of automotive businesses up and down McLaughlin and other parts of, but I did not get any sense that DEQ was likely to revisit that, or that it would take a lot more, a bigger coalition, a bigger, event or something to get them to revisit that, which I was definitely disappointed in. But I've had some fairly lengthy exchanges with a few people at DEQ about it, and I'm not optimistic.
I am not either about that, to be honest. I think that mirrors what I've heard from both DEQ about the spill itself, and especially if it's considered arson, they end up not often issuing fines to the property owner. And the changing of those storage rules, while I have no question it would be a good thing, I think is going to be that kind of opens up DEQ's entire rulemaking process in some ways. And I think that is probably going to happen. It may happen in some way through the climate. If it doesn't happen through the climate executive order from the governor, which is going to open up a lot of rulemaking processes, then I don't know when it would go. But if that does open it up, that might be an opportunity at some point.
Kathy.
First off, thank you, Neil. You all have been crazy busy, and it's really it's really impressive to hear what's gone on in just a year. So kudos to you for keeping things going and making progress in so many places when you rely so much on volunteers, and we're in a pandemic year where everything is just harder. I wanted to inquire a little more about so I know that, when I look at the possible funding for dam removal, I think probably just based on my conversations in various rooms through JPACT, that culvert removal money is probably where it's at. But then the piece where I wonder if you could say a little bit more is about that coordination around who's on first, because who is responsible for that money will really kind of determine the success of the project going forward, and perhaps even before that, because you need to have that kind of worked out. So if you could say a bit about who those folks would be, who would the partners be, and kind of what are the prospects looking like from your perspective, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Sure. No, and that is kind of the question of the day. So thank you, Council President, for kind of cutting right through to it. And I'll confess that I'm a little behind on email that came through about that today, where we were starting to plow through, for instance, what the various agreements for when, again, using this Middle Fork Nooksack dam removal process as a bit of a model, where the city of Bellingham owned the dam, but American Rivers managed all the grants that removed it. And American Rivers has shared with Kelly and I kind of what that agreement looked like. and how it was managed so that, in this case, the city of Bellingham did not have to deal with all of the ins and outs of grant reporting. And obviously in this case, it's possible that either the city of Milwaukie could be the applicant, like it was during the ARA funding, or it could be American Rivers in partnership with ODOT and the city of Milwaukie. Again, we'd be probably writing this grant largely for the dam removal and bridge, not because knowing how well the lake restoration pencils out. The other possibility that has been broached is that because all of these federal agencies are going to, in the words of NOAA Fisheries, trying to move $800 million through what has been a $10 million hole, are really they're struggling to figure out how they are going to manage it. And there is also the possibility of what's called a portfolio application, where 5 different projects or however many different projects that address the same fish population or the same level of projects in the Kellogg-Mount-Scott watershed, for instance, get packaged into one application. And that the advantage for NOAA Fisheries is that they only have fewer projects to manage. It's possible that American Rivers, this is, I would say, a long shot, but it's possible American Rivers could be submitting an application for 3 different dam removals that all improve salmon population, of which Kellogg Dam is one. So we are still trying to sort that out, but we're certainly aware that whoever ends up managing that grant is going to need resources to do that. And I've managed enough federal grants in the past, in my previous life, to know that that's a chunk of work and it needs to be accounted for. Kelly, you have anything you want to add on that side of things?
No, I just thought I should turn my camera on. You said my name, but yeah, no, I think I would also just commend Council President Heisey on. I think there's a lot of opportunity, but understanding who has what capacity and who has not only the capacity, because almost none of us have the capacity, but who has to be involved in what part. But it's been really cool. I've really appreciated Neil engaging with American Rivers, and just even being able to see the agreement with Bellingham is like, that kind of stuff's helpful to me. So I've appreciated seeing it. I don't know where we go next, because we still have, even though there's potential resource, we still don't have that resource, and we still have the same people with the same amount of time and focus. So it's just, but we're trying to be really cognizant of opportunities and responsive and responsible about them, and to the best that we can.
Yeah, do you have a sense of, or Kelly, or both, sense of the when and the where of the levers that need to be pulled, or whose ear needs to be whispered in at what point? I mean, this whole thing is like this giant moving, and I've lost track. I can't keep who's on first.
Right now, I think the ears that need to be whispered in / shouted in is the OTC for sure. If the big money in this process, I mean, not that $800 million is small to people like me, but the real big money is the 1.3 billion, I think it is, that the state of Oregon, that Oregon Department of Transportation has in new stimulus money. And part of what, there is that, and obviously the council's already sent that letter, and we've testified, and so have some other folks. And I think that is another level of pressure. I think the other place where that can go is the governor's office, and basically saying, hey, this is a priority that, again, if Governor Brown decides she wants to make this part of something she pushes along before she leaves office, that's great. And that could be something that she gets a lot of credit for. So that's kind of the first part. On the fish passage related funds, NOAA Fisheries has a very strong advocate for this project in Megan Callahan Grant, really wants to see it happen. I don't think she needs any convincing. She just needs us to show her that we are ready and that we thought through it and can make the case for it. The pieces of it that may come into play is that when the congressionally directed spending conversation starts up again, if that does move to the House, that conversation about this particular line item in the Commerce, Justice, and Science Appropriations Bill shifts from the Senate to the House. And we've had plenty of conversations with Congressman Schrader's staff. They're aware of it. They've been out to see it. John Serra used to work for Target Power before he took that job, so he was actually already familiar with the project from working for her. But that's where that conversation will go. But I think right now, for the time being, the game from who needs to be really persuaded is it's ODOT and it's the various agencies as they start to develop lists of projects.
If nobody else has any questions on that, I'm changing topics slightly. Has Wes been coordinating with you on their project that they're looking at in Three Creeks? Yeah, we were just out there Wednesday. Yes, they have. Generally speaking, and I think it's a good project in terms of most of its concept. I would like it to have ideally done their concept in the early stages of addressing a better job of how fish passage at that control structure is assessed. But I also know they're in conversations with ODFW's fish passage team about that. So I'm hopeful that funky 1980s era water control structure there will not be too big a barrier to fish getting into the site. The desire to realign the channel back into the floodplain, I think, makes sense. How they're talking about doing it is going to get sorted out by geomorphologists. Their design is a little unusual, but the level of, because it's such a flat area, what they're proposing as a high level concept may make sense. It hasn't gone to design yet. That's going to be. Hopefully they will continue to listen to your advice.
Yeah, I hope so. They've certainly been considering it thus far, and always obviously more than happy to make sure that anything we say, we'll make sure we share with you.
Cool, thanks.
Neil, you didn't mention it, but you have a new staffer. You might want to say something about that.
Yeah, we hired a watershed restoration manager who started work last week. Her name is Amy Van Riesen, and I don't know if any of you have been on Zoom calls with her yet. She lives in the general region. She's done watershed restoration before for the city of Sacramento and the Sacramento Flood Control Authority and the Confederate Tribes of Umatilla. So she is learning. She's a fish biologist by training. She is learning our watershed. So we were out looking at Phillips Creek today. We'll be out looking at Gordon Creek tomorrow. She's seen a lot of sites and met a lot of people. And I know she'll meet Lisa later this week. And I think she may have met Kelly, but and you'll see her around too. She's fun to work with already.
Very cool. Yeah, I'd like to echo something somebody said earlier. You guys have done an amazing amount of work, and it's been really cool to watch Nikki Wick evolve and grow and become more powerful. And I think you deserve a fair amount of the credit for that. So thank you and great work.
Thank you, and thank you for your partnership. And again, we are a watershed council, and watershed councils, they were conceived of back in the days of the 90s and Microsoft Internet Explorer, and all of that was that they were going to be a meeting ground where all the different folks involved in watershed management could kind of hash out solutions together. I feel like we're being true to that. So
cool. All right. Well, excellent presentation. If nobody else has anything, we will call an end to this work session and see everybody back in 27 minutes or whatever it is for the regular session. Thanks, Neil.
thank you.